Hey folks, Wade Garrison here. I'm 52 years old, and I spent the last 28 years of my life working for City Public Works.
Yeah, I was one of those guys you'd see at 3 a.m. during a blizzard, making sure the roads were clear so you could get to work safely. I retired 2 years ago, thinking I'd finally get to enjoy the quiet life. I live in a place called Meadowview Estates. Sounds nice, right? Gated community, tree-lined streets, the whole suburban dream package. My wife Sarah and I moved here 15 years ago. She loved this place, especially that corner lot we bought at 2247 Oakmont Drive. Last winter, Sarah passed away. Pancreatic cancer. It happened fast, too fast. One day we're planning our spring garden, the next, well, you know how these things go. The house feels emptier now, even though I'm not alone. My mother-in-law, Grace, moved in with me about 6 months ago. She's 78, sharp as a tack mentally, but she's got a heart condition that requires careful management. Sarah made me promise I'd look after her mom, and I intend to keep that promise. The property itself is something special. A corner lot with about 1/3 of an acre. Sarah's pride and joy was her rose garden along the eastern easement strip. She won the County Garden Club Award 3 years running with those roses. American Beauties, Pink Promises, Golden Celebrations. She knew every variety by heart. I kept that garden going after she passed. It was my way of keeping her memory alive, you know? Every spring, those roses would come back, and it felt like a little piece of Sarah was still with me. Then, Charlene Westbrook entered my life. She moved into Meadowview about 18 months ago, one of those massive McMansions at the end of Willow Court. You know the type, all white columns and fake shutters, trying way too hard to look elegant. Charlene drives a white Tesla Model X, always spotless, always gleaming. She's about 48, blonde hair that's definitely not natural, and she's got this way of smiling at you that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Real estate agent by trade, social climber by passion. Last spring, she got herself elected HOA board president. The previous president, Bill Morrison, was a retired teacher, laid-back, reasonable guy. He moved to Florida to be near his grandkids, and somehow Charlene convinced enough people that she was the dynamic leadership Meadowview needed. Her campaign slogan? Elevating our community standards. What that actually meant became clear pretty quick. Within a month, she'd sent me 3 separate violation notices. First one, my 10-year-old Ford F-250 pickup was detracting from neighborhood aesthetics because I parked it in my own driveway instead of the garage. Mind you, the garage was full of Sarah's things I wasn't ready to sort through yet, but Charlene didn't care about that. Second notice, my mailbox was non-regulation because it was black instead of the approved bronze tone. The same mailbox that had been there for 15 years without complaint. Third notice, my front lawn grass was 1/4 inch over the maximum acceptable height of 3 inches. She actually sent someone out with a ruler. I should have seen what was coming. The November HOA meeting should have been my warning. I almost didn't go. Grace was having a rough day, but something told me I should make an appearance. Charlene ran those meetings like a corporate presentation. PowerPoint slides, printed agendas, the whole 9 yards. That night's topic? Winter Maintenance Optimization Strategy. Now, as we all know, our snow removal costs have been simply astronomical, she announced, clicking to a slide with a pie chart. Last winter, we spent nearly $47,000 on snow removal services. That's $47,000 that could have gone to improving our amenities. My neighbor, Tom Henderson, who sits on the board as treasurer, raised his hand. Charlene, most of that cost was because you insisted on hiring that premium service instead of the contractor Bill Morrison had used for years. We paid almost double. You should have seen her face. But Charlene's good at one thing: deflection. Tom, we can discuss vendor selection at another time. What I'm proposing is a more efficient approach to snow disposal. Instead of paying to haul it off-site, we designate temporary staging areas within the community. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Seemed like typical HOA nonsense. I voted against it on principle. I always vote against Charlene's proposals on principle, but it passed 4-2.
Then December hit us like a freight train. The Weather Service had been tracking a massive system coming down from Canada for about a week. They were calling it a generational storm, one of those blizzards that only happens every 20 or 30 years. Tuesday, December 12th, it started snowing around 2 p.m. I've seen a lot of snowstorms in my career, but this was something else. By 6 p.m., we had 8 inches. By midnight, 14. When I woke up Wednesday morning and looked out the window, I couldn't see my truck anymore. The official measurement was 18.7 inches. The whole region shut down. Schools closed, businesses closed. The governor declared a state of emergency. But here's the thing about living in a gated community. The city doesn't plow your private streets. That's on the HOA. By Thursday morning, the main roads were mostly clear, but inside Meadowview Estates, nothing. People were getting antsy. I fired up my own snowblower and cleared Grace's path to the mailbox, did our driveway as best I could with that much accumulation. Friday morning, I heard the trucks, big diesel engines rumbling down Oakmont Drive. I figured the HOA had finally gotten their snow removal contractor out here. I was in the kitchen making Grace her breakfast when I heard the beeping. You know, that backup warning sound trucks make? I walked to the front window, looked out, and felt my stomach drop. There were 3 dump trucks, commercial size, the kind we used in public works for major jobs, and they were backing up. Not to the retention pond where snow disposal was supposed to happen. They were backing up to my property line. I ran outside without even grabbing my coat. The temperature was about 15 degrees, wind chill making it feel like 0. The first truck was already dumping. And I mean dumping. A massive load of snow, ice, sand, and salt coming down like an avalanche directly onto the easement strip where Sarah's roses were dormant. The sound was tremendous, like thunder, but endless. "Hey! Hey!" I was shouting, waving my arms. "What the hell are you doing?" The driver of the first truck just looked at me, shrugged, and kept going. Behind him, the second truck was lining up. I tried to get to the third driver, actually ran up and banged on his door. He rolled down his window about 2 inches. "Just following orders, buddy. Talk to whoever hired us." He pointed down the street, and that's when I saw it. That white Tesla, parked about 50 yards away. Charlene Westbrook sitting in the driver's seat, watching. When she saw me looking, she smiled and gave a little wave. I stood there in my shirt sleeves, shivering, watching 3 dump trucks unload what must have been 40 tons of snow, ice, and chemical-laden road debris directly onto my property. The pile kept growing, 6 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet. By the time they finished, there was a wall of contaminated snow 12 feet high and probably 30 feet wide, completely blocking my garage door and burying Sarah's garden under a toxic mountain. Grace came to the door. "Wade, what's happening?" Her voice was thin, worried. I could see she was pale. The stress wasn't good for her heart. "Nothing, Grace. Just go back inside where it's warm. I'll handle this." But even as I said it, I had no idea how I was going to handle it.
It got worse? Of course it got worse. Saturday morning, 2 days after the dump, I found an envelope in my mailbox. Official HOA letterhead, Charlene's signature at the bottom. Dear Mr. Garrison, it has come to the attention of the Architectural Review Committee that your property at 2247 Oakmont Drive is currently in violation of Section 7.3 of the Community Bylaws regarding unsightly accumulation of materials.
Can you believe that? They dump contaminated snow on my property and then they fine me for it being there? The fine was $500 and I had 10 business days to remediate the violation or face additional penalties. There was another paragraph too. Additionally, your failure to maintain clear access to your driveway represents a safety violation under Section 9.1. Please ensure all access points are cleared within 48 hours. I sat at the kitchen table reading this garbage, feeling my blood pressure spike. Grace was having her morning tea, noticed my face. "Wade, you're getting red. Should I get your blood pressure medication?" "No, Mom, I'm fine. Just HOA stupidity." I didn't want to worry her. Her heart condition meant stress could literally kill her, and she'd already been through enough losing Sarah. But I wasn't fine. That snow pile wasn't just unsightly, it was dangerous. The salt concentration alone was probably going to kill every plant within 20 feet. And the chemicals? In public works, we used calcium chloride and magnesium chloride for major highways, but never near residential areas. That stuff is nasty. I spent the weekend trying to dig out. It was impossible. That much snow, that heavy, that contaminated, I'd need industrial equipment. I called around. Every snow removal company within 50 miles was booked solid for weeks. The blizzard had created so much work that everyone was completely slammed. By Monday, I'd managed to clear a narrow path to the garage door, but that was it. The mountain remained, slowly leaching its poison into Sarah's garden soil. Evening, I got an email from Charlene. Emergency board meeting, Wednesday, 7 p.m., my residence. Attendance mandatory for all homeowners with outstanding violations. I showed up at 6:59 p.m. Charlene's house is one of those places that looks like a furniture showroom. Everything white and chrome, nothing comfortable, nothing lived in. There were about 8 other homeowners there, all looking confused. Charlene stood at the front of her living room with a laptop connected to a projector screen. Professional to a fault. "Thank you all for coming. I know several of you have questions about the new snow management protocol. I want to assure you all that everything we're doing is completely by the book. In fact, Mr. Garrison," she looked directly at me with that dead-eyed smile, "you actually signed an agreement authorizing us to use your property for temporary snow staging." What? I literally felt the room tilt. The hell I did. "Language, please, Wade." She clicked her remote and a document appeared on screen. "The Community Maintenance Agreement, signed last October. See? That's your signature right there." I stood up and walked closer to the screen. There was a document, official-looking, with the HOA letterhead, and there, at the bottom, was something that looked like my signature. But it wasn't. The loops were wrong. The G in Garrison was too tight, the W too loose. I've signed my name about 1,000,000 times in my life. I know what it looks like. That's a forgery. The room went dead silent. Charlene's smile faltered for just a second. "Excuse me? That's not my signature. That's a forgery, which means this document is fraudulent, which means you've been lying to everyone here about having authorization to dump contaminated snow on my property." Tom Henderson leaned forward in his chair. "Tom, do you have the original document, the hard copy?" It's in storage. I'll provide it at the next meeting." But her voice had lost that confident edge. She was lying, and badly. I left that meeting and went straight home to do research. Grace was already asleep, which was good. I didn't need her worrying about this. I pulled out every piece of paper I had from when we bought the house, every HOA document, every amendment to the bylaws. Nothing. No community maintenance agreement, no authorization for using private property for snow storage. In fact, Section 12 of the original 1987 charter was very specific. All snow and ice removed from community streets shall be transported to the designated off-site disposal area or to the retention pond facility, weather permitting. 21. Thursday morning, I drove down to the county recorder's office. I know the folks there from my public works days. They pulled every document associated with Meadowview Estates for me. 21:30. No agreement, no easement, no authorization. Charlene had made the whole thing up and forged my signature to cover her tracks. 22. That afternoon, I called my buddy Jerry Patterson. Jerry and I went to high school together, and he'd gone on to become a pretty successful attorney, real estate law, contracts, that kind of thing. 2220. Wade, how you holding up? How's Grace? Jerry's one of the good ones. Came to Sarah's funeral, sent flowers, the whole deal. 2040. We're managing, Jer. Listen, I need some legal advice. I laid out the whole situation. The dumping, the fine, the forged document. 23. Jerry was quiet for a moment. Then, Wade, this is serious. That's criminal trespass, destruction of property, forgery, possibly fraud. You need to document everything. Photos, witnesses, copies of all communications. This woman has really screwed herself. 2 days later, everything got worse. Saturday, December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. Grace was having a good day, wanted to make her famous sugar cookies, Sarah's favorite recipe. I'd been out trying to clear more of the ice and snow, create a safer path. The temperature had swung up to 35 degrees, then crashed back down overnight, so everything was covered in a layer of treacherous ice underneath fresh snow. Grace insisted she could manage the grocery run herself while I worked. Wade, I'm not helpless. I just need eggs and vanilla. The store is 10 minutes away.
I should have gone with her. I should have insisted. But she was so determined to maintain her independence, and I understood that. Sarah had been the same way. I was working on clearing the ice when I heard it. A sound I'll never forget. A short scream, then a thud, then silence. My heart stopped. Grace? Grace! I dropped everything and ran. She was lying at the base of that massive snow pile, grocery bags scattered, eggs broken everywhere. She'd slipped on the ice trying to navigate around the toxic mountain Charlene had created, fell hard on her side. Can't breathe, Grace gasped. Her face was gray, lips tinged blue. I knew that look from Public Works, potential cardiac event. I called 911 immediately. 52-year-old woman, fall on ice, possible cardiac event, history of heart condition. I rattled off the information while trying to keep Grace calm, keep her warm. The ambulance took 18 minutes to get there. 18 minutes because they couldn't navigate the snow-clogged streets of Meadowview Estates properly. Had to come in the back service entrance. Grace was conscious but in severe pain. The ER doctor said Grace had 3 bruised ribs and was going into arrhythmia from the stress and pain. They had to stabilize her heart with medication, keep her overnight for observation. I sat in that hospital room, watching Grace sleep with an IV in her arm and monitors beeping, and something inside me just hardened. This wasn't just about property anymore. This wasn't just about roses or snow or petty HOA politics. Charlene Westbrook had nearly killed my mother-in-law with her negligence and greed. Sunday morning, I drove Grace home from the hospital, made her comfortable on the couch with blankets and her favorite tea. Then I got in my truck and drove through Meadowview Estates. Every street was plowed perfectly. Clean pavement, neat snowbanks on the sides. Every driveway was clear. Charlene's house, pristine. Not a single flake of snow anywhere near her property. She'd specifically targeted my property because it was convenient, because my corner lot was out of the way, because she thought a widower and an old lady wouldn't fight back. When I got home, there was another envelope in the mailbox. I didn't even need to open it to know what it was, but I did anyway. Reading with contempt. Second notice of violation. Due to continued non-compliance with community standards, your fine has been increased to $1,000. Additionally, the board has voted to place a lien on your property if remediation is not completed within 5 business days. That was it. That was the moment I decided Charlene Westbrook had made the biggest mistake of her life. I picked up the phone and called Jerry Patterson again. Jerry, how fast can you get me copies of the original 1987 subdivision plat and all associated easement documents for Meadowview Estates? Wade, what are you planning? Jerry came through. By Monday morning, I had a complete package of documents spread across my kitchen table. The original subdivision plat from when Meadowview Estates was first developed in 1987, every easement agreement, every deed transfer, every amendment. Grace was resting upstairs, still sore but stable. I had the radio playing softly, some weather guy droning on about another storm system forming in the Dakotas expected to hit us by midweek. I started with the plat map, traced every property line with my finger. Meadowview Estates is shaped like a rough letter P. Private streets loop through the interior, all branching off Oakmont Drive, which is the main access point. And then I saw it. Right there on the 1987 plat in faded engineer's notation. My property, Lot 47, 2247 Oakmont Drive, wasn't just a corner lot, it was the corner lot. The notation read, Lot 47 hereby grants perpetual easement access across the western 20-foot strip for ingress and egress to subdivision parcels 1 through 127, subject to maintenance of neighborly cooperation and good faith as defined in Article 9. Do you understand what that means? Every single property in Meadowview Estates, all 127 homes, their access to the public road system runs through my property. The easement that lets them use that 20-foot strip to connect their private streets to Oakmont Drive doesn't exist without my cooperation. I grabbed my phone, called Jerry. Jer, I need you to look at something. Can you come over? 20 minutes later, Jerry was sitting at my kitchen table, reading glasses perched on his nose, studying the documents. He read silently for about 5 minutes, occasionally making small humming sounds. Then he looked up at me with the biggest grin I've ever seen on his normally serious face. Wade, do you realize what you have here? I think so, but I need you to confirm I'm not crazy. Jerry tapped the plat map. This easement was granted conditionally. The original developer, Marcus Caldwell, he was old school, believed in handshake deals and community spirit. This language about neighborly cooperation and good faith is deliberately vague, but there's legal precedent. Which means that if the beneficiaries of the easement, the HOA and the other homeowners, violate the principle of good faith, you have grounds to revoke or restrict the easement. It's rare, but it's absolutely defensible. I felt something electric run through me. How rare are we talking? I'd have to do more research, but I handled a case about 7 years ago, farm access dispute. Similar conditional language. The court ruled that when one party acts in bad faith, and Wade deliberately dumping toxic materials on someone's property, forging documents, causing injury, that's textbook bad faith. The easement can be temporarily or permanently revoked. I sat back in my chair, mind racing. So theoretically, I could block the access point. Jerry held up a hand. Theoretically, but Wade, you need to be very careful here. You do this wrong, you could face legal consequences yourself. You need documentation, you need witnesses, and you need leverage to force a settlement. What kind of leverage? The kind that makes the HOA realize fighting you is more expensive and more embarrassing than just paying you what you're owed and leaving you alone. But you can't just block access and leave it blocked. That causes its own problems. You need to make a point, then negotiate from strength. I need to talk to one more person, I said. Can you give me until tomorrow to put something together? That afternoon, I called Mike Torres. Mike's a licensed surveyor, runs his own company, and I've known him since he was a junior tech with the city. Good guy, meticulous worker. Mike, I need a complete property survey of my lot. All boundaries, all easements, all encroachments. How fast can you do it? For you, Wade? I can have a crew out there tomorrow morning. Weather's supposed to hold until Wednesday. What's going on? Let's just say I need to know exactly where my property lines are before I have an important conversation with my HOA. Mike laughed. Say no more. I've dealt with HOAs before. I'll make sure everything is documented to the inch. Tuesday morning, Mike's crew showed up at 8 a.m. with their transit equipment, GPS units, and metal detectors for finding the original survey pins. I watched them work, drinking coffee, planning my next moves.
By 2 p.m., Mike had preliminary results. He spread the survey drawings on the hood of his truck. "Wade, I've got good news and interesting news. Good news, your property lines are exactly where they should be. No encroachment issues except what? Except that snow pile. It's not just on the easement strip. About a third of it is actually over the property line, onto what should be HOA common area, which means they created a hazard on their own property, then blamed you for it. And the access easement? Confirmed. That 20-foot strip is technically your land with a conditional easement grant. The way this is written, if the condition fails," Mike whistled low, "you could put up a fence tomorrow and it'd be legal. They'd have to go to court to challenge it, and based on what you've told me about the dumping, they'd probably lose." I shook Mike's hand. "Send me the full report and your bill. This is exactly what I needed." Back inside, I checked on Grace. She was napping peacefully, then sat down to write out my battle plan. Jerry said I needed leverage. I needed documentation. I needed to make a point. I was about to give Charlene Westbrook an education in exactly how much cooperation matters when you're dealing with someone who understands both the law and heavy equipment.
The weather forecast was calling for another major storm Wednesday night into Thursday. The news was calling it the second Christmas blizzard, predicting 14 to 16 inches of new snow. Perfect. I had work to do. Tuesday night, I sat down with a legal pad and started itemizing. Jerry had told me I needed a number, a specific, defensible amount for damages. First, soil remediation. That much salt and chemical contamination would require excavation of contaminated soil, about 400 cubic yards based on the affected area. Then, replacement with clean topsoil and amendment. Commercial rate, $6,200. Second, plant replacement. Sarah's rose garden had 23 established rose bushes, some of them 8 to 10 years old. Replacement cost for mature specimens plus installation, $3,400. Third, structural damage. The weight of that snow pile had cracked my concrete driveway in 2 places and damaged the garage door mechanism. Repair estimates, $2,100. Fourth, medical expenses. Grace's ER visit, ambulance, medication, follow-up cardiology appointment, $4,200. Thank God for her Medicare supplement, but we still had copays. Fifth, equipment rental for emergency snow removal since I had to handle it myself, $1,500. Sixth, legal fees for Jerry's consultation and document review. He'd given me a friends and family rate, but it was still $3,000 for the work he'd already done, with more to come. Seventh, property devaluation. Having your yard used as a toxic dump site? That affects resale value. Conservative estimate, $2,000. Total, $22,400, plus ongoing legal fees. I rounded it to $22,400 in damages, with Jerry to bill additional fees separately if this went to litigation. Wednesday morning, I drafted a formal demand letter on my computer. Jerry had given me a template, and I modified it to fit my situation. Dear Meadowview Estates HOA Board of Directors, this letter constitutes formal notice of property damage, trespass, and breach of good faith under the terms of the conditional easement granted by Lot 47 in the original 1987 subdivision plat. On or about December 13, 2024, representatives acting under direction of HOA President Charlene Westbrook did willfully and without authorization dump approximately 40 tons of contaminated snow, ice, salt, and chemical debris onto private property at 2247 Oakmont Drive. This action resulted in soil contamination requiring remediation, destruction of established landscaping, property damage, physical injury to an elderly resident requiring emergency medical treatment, and creation of hazardous conditions. Additionally, documents presented by President Westbrook purporting to authorize this action bear a forged signature and constitute fraud under state law. Demands. The HOA shall, within 10 business days, 1. Remove all contaminated materials from the property at HOA expense.
2. Provide payment of $22,400 for documented damages. 3. Remove Charlene Westbrook from her position as board president. 4. Enter into a new easement agreement with specific protections against future violations. Notice: failure to comply with these demands will result in immediate restriction of easement access across Lot 47, forcing all community traffic to use alternative routes pending legal resolution. The property owner has been advised by legal counsel that such action is legally defensible under the good faith cooperation clause in the original easement grant. Respectfully, Wade Garrison, property owner, Lot 47. I printed 3 copies, one for the HOA board via certified mail, one for Charlene personally via certified mail, and one for my records. Sent them both from the post office Wednesday afternoon. The tracking showed both letters delivered by 2 p.m. Thursday. The storm was forecast to start Thursday evening.
Thursday morning, 10:47 a.m. My phone rang. Unknown number, but local area code. I answered. Mr. Garrison? This is Daniel Anderson from Anderson, Bailey & Associates, legal counsel for Meadowview Estates HOA. I'm calling regarding your rather aggressive letter. Something in his tone was off. Too smooth, too rehearsed. I wasn't aware the HOA had retained new counsel. Who did you say you were? Anderson, Bailey & Associates. We specialize in property law and HOA disputes. Now, Mr. Garrison, your demands are completely unreasonable. The HOA acted within its authority, and your threats to block community access constitute— Hold on, let me write this down. Anderson, Bailey & Associates. What's your bar number? Silence. Then, I'll have to call you back with that information. But, Mr. Garrison, I strongly advise— No, I'll tell you what. I'm going to call your firm's main number right now and verify you're actually who you say you are. What's that number? Click. He hung up. I immediately called Jerry. You ever heard of Anderson, Bailey & Associates? Supposed to be a local property law firm? Hold on. Searching now. Wade, there's no firm by that name registered in the State Bar Association. Where'd you get this name? Someone just called me claiming to be their attorney, threatening me about my demand letter. Wade, that's a crime. Impersonating an attorney? Unauthorized practice of law? Did you record the call? No, but I've got the number on my caller ID. Think we can trace it? Jerry was quiet for a moment. Let me make some calls. In the meantime, document everything. Time of call, what was said, the number. If someone's pretending to be a lawyer to intimidate you, that's felony territory. I hung up and sat there staring at my phone. Charlene was desperate enough to either fake a legal threat herself or have someone do it for her, which meant my demand letter had hit home harder than I expected. The second betrayal. Thursday afternoon, the sky turned that particular shade of gray-white that every public works veteran knows means business. The Weather Service updated their forecast, 14 to 18 inches now, possibly more in localized bands, wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour, blizzard warning from 6 p.m. Thursday through 10 a.m. Friday. I made sure Grace was comfortable, stocked up on her medications, had the generator fueled and ready in case we lost power. By 5 p.m., the first flakes were falling, big, fat ones that meant heavy accumulation was coming. At 6:30 p.m., I heard the trucks again. Same sound, same diesel rumble. My stomach dropped. They wouldn't. Not after my demand letter. Not after everything. But they did. I grabbed my phone and my winter coat and ran outside. The snow was already coming down hard, visibility maybe 100 yards. And there they were, 3 dump trucks backing up to my property again. And standing next to her white Tesla, directing traffic with hand signals like some kind of demented traffic cop, was Charlene Westbrook. I started recording video on my phone as I approached. "Charlene, what the hell do you think you're doing?" She turned to me with that smile, snowflakes catching in her hair. "Wade, just managing our community snow removal. We're all in this together, remember?" "You got my demand letter. You know this is illegal trespass. You know."
Oh, Wade, your little letter? Oh, Wade, we consulted with our attorney, real attorney, by the way, not whatever ambulance chaser you found, and he assured us we're completely within our rights. Now, if you'll excuse me, we have work to do. The documentation. The first truck began dumping. I kept recording, making sure to capture everything. Charlene's face, the truck numbers, the license plates, the snow pile's location relative to my property markers. Mike's survey crew had left visible stakes. For the record, I said loudly, camera still rolling, I am explicitly denying permission for this dumping. This is trespass. This is property damage. You are being recorded. Charlene laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, Wade, you're so dramatic. It's just snow. It'll melt in spring. It's contaminated with road salt and industrial chemicals. It's already killed my wife's garden. It nearly killed my mother-in-law, and you're doing it again. Your mother-in-law fell because she's old and clumsy. That's not the HOA's fault. Now please, get off HOA property. You're standing on the easement. Something in the way she said it, the casual cruelty about Grace, the smugness, made a decision crystallize in my mind. I stopped recording and looked Charlene right in the eye. You know what? You're right. I am standing on the easement. My easement. The one I own. The one you use by my permission. And Charlene, I'm about to teach you what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. I turned and walked back to my house through the driving snow. Behind me, I could hear the second and third trucks dumping their loads. By the time they finished, the new pile was even bigger than the first. 22 feet high, they measured later. A literal mountain of contaminated snow sitting right on top of Sarah's garden. But I wasn't watching anymore. I was on the phone with Jerry, then with Mike Torres, the surveyor, then with Drake's equipment rental out on Route 49. The real attorney. Friday morning, 9:15 a.m. The storm had dumped 16 inches overnight and was still going. My doorbell rang. I looked out the window. A man in a black overcoat standing under an umbrella next to a Mercedes sedan with a Bar Association sticker on the windshield. I opened the door. Can I help you? Mr. Garrison, I'm Robert Presley, attorney at law. I represent the Meadowview Estates HOA. May I come in? I promise I'm a real attorney. He said that last part with a slight smile and handed me his business card. I checked the card. Robert Presley, Esquire, licensed in good standing. I stepped aside and let him in. He stomped snow off his shoes carefully on the mat. Grace was in the kitchen making coffee. She looked alarmed at the stranger, but I gave her a reassuring nod. It's okay, Mom. Business discussion. Presley and I sat in the living room. He pulled out a leather portfolio. Mr. Garrison, I need to be frank with you. I was retained by the HOA 6 months ago when Miss Westbrook took over as president. I handled their routine legal matters, document review, bylaws amendments, that sort of thing. But I had absolutely no knowledge of this snow dumping situation until your demand letter arrived. I certainly never told Miss Westbrook that dumping contaminated materials on your property was legal. I never saw any community maintenance agreement, and frankly, if I had, I would have told her it was unenforceable. So the phone call I got yesterday from Anderson, Bailey and Associates? Not me, not anyone I authorized. That's being investigated. Mr. Garrison, I'm here to discuss settlement.
The preparation. I leaned back in my chair. I'm listening. Presley opened his portfolio. The board, minus Miss Westbrook, has authorized me to offer removal of the snow at HOA expense and payment of $5,000 for your trouble. No. Mr. Garrison, be reasonable. Reasonable? Your client dumped toxic waste on my property twice, forged my signature, filed false violation notices, caused my mother-in-law to be hospitalized, and impersonated a lawyer to threaten me. My demand is $22,400 plus legal fees, Charlene's removal, and a new easement agreement. Non-negotiable. Presley sighed. The board doesn't have that kind of money readily available. The reserve fund is... Then I suggest Miss Westbrook contribute personally, since this was her idea. You have until Monday, 5 p.m. After that, things get complicated." I stood up, signaling the meeting was over. Presley stood too, studying my face. "Mr. Garrison, what are you planning?" Cryptic smile. "Community education, Mr. Presley. Sometimes people need to learn what cooperation really means. Have a safe drive home. The roads are getting bad." After he left, I checked my watch. 10:30 a.m. The rental equipment company had confirmed delivery for 2 p.m. Mike Torres was standing by. Jerry had the legal documentation ready. Grace appeared in the doorway. "Wade, you have that look, the same look your father-in-law used to get when he was planning something big." I smiled at her. "Mom, how would you like to see some real community spirit in action?" By 2:15 p.m., there was a Cat 314 excavator with a 10-foot snow blade sitting in my driveway, delivered on a lowboy trailer despite the ongoing storm. The rental guy looked at me like I was crazy. "You know this storm isn't supposed to clear until tomorrow morning, right?" "Yep, but I've got work to do tonight. Thanks for getting it here." I spent the rest of Friday afternoon going over the equipment, checking the hydraulics, making sure everything worked. I'd operated excavators before in my public works days. This was a newer model, but the principles were the same. The storm finally stopped around 10 p.m. The news said we'd gotten 18.3 inches total. Meadowview Estates was buried again. Through my window, I could see lights on in houses throughout the neighborhood. Everyone was snowed in, waiting for the HOA's plow service to clear the streets. Quiet determination. I set my alarm for 5:30 a.m. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day.
Saturday morning, December 30th. My alarm went off at 5:30. Still dark outside, temperature about 12 degrees. Clear skies now. The storm had moved on, leaving behind almost 2 feet of new snow on top of what was already there. I dressed in layers: thermal underwear, work pants, flannel shirt, insulated coveralls, boots, gloves, hat. Grabbed a thermos of coffee Grace had prepared the night before. She'd figured out what I was planning and hadn't tried to stop me. She just kissed my cheek and said, "Give him hell, Wade." At 5:45, I fired up the excavator. The diesel engine roared to life in the pre-dawn stillness, loud enough to wake some neighbors. I could see bedroom lights clicking on. Good. I wanted witnesses. The Cat 314 is a beautiful piece of machinery. 22,000 pounds of hydraulic power and precision control. I'd rented the snowblade attachment specifically, 10 feet wide, curved for maximum efficiency, perfect for moving large quantities of snow. I started with the mountain Charlene's crew had created. The excavator blade bit into the contaminated snow pile like a hot knife through butter. I didn't move it away from my property. I moved it toward my property line, specifically toward the 20-foot easement strip where community traffic accessed Oakmont Drive. Scoop by scoop, blade by blade, I built a new wall. Not on my property, on the exact property line, right where the easement began. A wall of snow 6 feet high, 30 feet wide, blocking the only entrance and exit to Meadowview Estates. The sun came up around 7:15 a.m. By that time, I was halfway done and a crowd had gathered. Neighbors in bathrobes and coats, standing in their driveways watching. Some were filming on their phones. Tom Henderson, the board treasurer, walked up but kept a respectful distance from the excavator. Presentation. At 7:30 a.m., right on schedule, Charlene arrived in her white Tesla. She'd probably gotten frantic phone calls from other residents. She pulled up as close as she could get, about 50 yards away, blocked by the snow wall I'd created, and got out screaming. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You can't do this. This is illegal. I'm calling the police." I stopped the excavator, set the brake, and climbed down. Walked over to where she was standing on the other side of my snow wall. Probably 30 people watching now, including Tom Henderson and Mike Torres. I'd asked Mike to be there as my surveyor witness. "Good morning, Charlene. Beautiful day, isn't it? I'm just relocating this snow you so generously donated to my property.
As you can see, I'm placing it exactly on the property line, right where my land ends and the community easement begins. You're blocking the street. People need to get out. We have jobs, appointments, emergencies. I agree. It's very inconvenient when someone blocks your access with a huge pile of snow, isn't it? Almost like it's dangerous and inconsiderate. This is different. This is public access. You can't just... Actually, it's not public access. It's a private easement across my private property granted conditionally in the original 1987 plat under terms of neighborly cooperation and good faith. Let me ask you something, Charlene. Do you think dumping toxic waste on my property twice represents neighborly cooperation and good faith? The crowd was dead silent. A few people pulled out their phones to record. We had authorization, the agreement. The forged agreement? The one with my fake signature? That agreement? Because I've got the county recorder's office, a handwriting expert, and an attorney who all say that document is fraudulent.
Right on cue, because of course Charlene had called them, 2 police cars pulled up on the public side of Oakmont Drive, lights flashing. They couldn't get into the community because of my snow wall. 2 officers got out and carefully made their way over the snow. I recognized one of them, Officer Martinez, who I'd worked with on joint city operations years ago. Wade Garrison, someone called in a report of property destruction and blocking a public roadway. I handed him a folder I'd prepared, copies of the original plat, Mike Torres's survey, photos of the dumping, documentation of the forged agreement, Grace's medical records from her fall, everything. Officer Martinez, this is not a public roadway. It's a private easement across my property. The easement was granted conditionally. The HOA, under Miss Westbrook's direction, violated those conditions by repeatedly dumping contaminated materials on my property, forging my signature and causing injury to my mother-in-law. I'm within my legal rights to restrict access pending resolution. Martinez looked through the documents, then at the massive snow pile on my property, then at Charlene. Miss Westbrook, is this your snow? It's community snow for community disposal. On his private property, without his permission? Charlene looked like she was going to explode. We have an agreement. The forged one? Martinez held up the signature comparison Mike had included in my documentation packet. Ma'am, this is looking like civil trespass at minimum, possibly criminal depending on the DA's assessment. The second officer, younger guy I didn't know, spoke up. Sir, even if you're in the right, you can't just block everyone in. That's a safety issue. What if there's a fire, medical emergency?
The fire department. Fair point, officer. Which is why I called the fire department at 5:30 this morning to give them advance notice and confirm alternative access routes. The community has a service entrance on Birch Street that emergency vehicles can use. I provided them with maps. As if on cue, because I'd also timed this, a fire truck pulled up on Oakmont Drive. Captain Rodriguez got out, a man I'd worked with for years on winter emergency planning. Mr. Garrison, Officer Martinez, looks like we've got an access situation. Mr. Garrison, you notified us as promised. The service entrance is accessible. We've confirmed we can reach any address in the community within regulation time using the alternate route. So, from a safety standpoint, Martinez asked. From a safety standpoint, it's inconvenient, but not immediately dangerous. That said, Mr. Garrison, how long are you planning to maintain this barrier? Captain, I'm happy to remove it as soon as the HOA removes the contaminated snow from my property and agrees to terms preventing future violations. I've made a formal settlement offer. I'm hoping we can resolve this quickly, ideally today. Martinez closed the folder. Okay, here's how this goes. This is civil, not criminal, unless someone wants to press charges about the trespassing and forgery. Ms. Westbrook, Mr. Garrison has documented your organization dumping materials on his property without authorization. You want to file charges against him for blocking the easement. He's going to file charges against you for trespassing, property damage, and fraud. You both want to go down that road? Charlene's face had gone from red to pale. She looked around at all the neighbors watching, at the police, at the fire department, at me standing calmly with my documentation. I need to contact the board. You do that.
I'll be right here, keeping this snow relocated exactly where it belongs, on the property line. Once we reach an agreement, I'll happily clear a path. Until then, welcome to community cooperation, Charlene." By 9:30 a.m., things had escalated beyond my expectations. A news van from Channel 7 pulled up on Oakmont Drive, then Channel 4, then Channel 12. Someone in the neighborhood had tipped them off, and this was too good a story to pass up. Man blocks entire neighborhood with snow in HOA dispute. Reporter Amanda Walsh from Channel 7 was first to interview me. Young, energetic, holding a microphone with the station logo. Her cameraman filmed the whole scene, the massive snow wall, the trapped residents, Charlene arguing on her phone in the background. "Mr. Garrison, can you explain what's happening here? Why have you blocked the only entrance to this community?" I held up one of the photos from my documentation packet, the original dump, the 12-foot pile burying Sarah's garden. "Ms. Walsh, what's happening is simple. The HOA, under Ms. Westbrook's direction, has twice dumped contaminated snow onto my property without permission. When I objected, they forged my signature on a fake authorization document. When my 78-year-old mother-in-law fell on the hazardous conditions they created and had to be hospitalized, they blamed her. They fined me $1,500 for the snow they dumped." "So this is retaliation?" "This is education, Ms. Walsh. This community uses a legal easement across my property to access the public road. That easement was granted conditionally based on good faith cooperation. When the HOA violated that good faith by committing trespass and potentially fraud, I exercised my legal right to restrict the easement. I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm just relocating the snow they gave me to the exact property line where their responsibility begins and mine ends. Community cooperation works both directions." Amanda smiled. She knew she had a great quote. "How long do you plan to keep the community blocked?" "As long as it takes for the HOA to remove the contaminated material from my property, compensate me for damages, and agree to terms preventing future violations. I've offered to negotiate in good faith. The ball's in their court." The news coverage did what I hoped it would. Applied public pressure. By 11 a.m., Tom Henderson called me. "Wade, we need to talk. Emergency board meeting right now. Can you come to the clubhouse?" "Tom, the clubhouse is on the other side of my snow wall. You want to talk? You come to my side." "Fair enough. Give me 20 minutes." Tom arrived with two other board members, Janet Kowalski and David Chen, not Charlene. They trudged through the snow to where I was standing by the excavator, drinking coffee from my thermos. Tom spoke first. "Wade, we owe you an apology. Most of us had no idea what Charlene was doing. She told us she had authorization from you, that everything was above board. When we saw your demand letter, we started asking questions. Robert Presley has been digging into the financial records." And Charlene authorized the dumping without board approval, used HOA funds to pay the trucking company, and created that fake authorization document. The phone call you got from the fake lawyer? She admitted it. Her brother-in-law made the call pretending to be an attorney. Wade, we're horrified. David Chen pulled out a checkbook. "The board has authorized an emergency vote. We're agreeing to your terms, all of them. $22,400 for damages. We'll cover Mr. Patterson's legal fees, and we're having an emergency session tonight to remove Charlene as president and from the board entirely." "And the snow removal?" Tom nodded. "We've got the emergency crew standing by. They can be here in an hour to start removing everything from your property, properly this time, hauled to the county disposal site. We'll also pay for soil testing and remediation in the spring." I looked at the three of them. They looked genuinely sorry, genuinely embarrassed by what Charlene had done. Tom had abstained from the vote to dump on my property. I remembered that. These were decent people who'd been lied to. "Okay," I said. "Here's what happens. You get the removal crew here within the hour. I'll clear a path for emergency access immediately. I never intended to keep people truly trapped, just to make a point. We'll sign the paperwork through Mr. Presley, and Charlene needs to be off the board before sunset." "Done," Tom said, extending his hand. I shook it. Janet had tears in her eyes. "Wade, I'm so sorry about Sarah's garden, about Grace getting hurt, about all of it. Charlene told us you were just being difficult, that you were stuck in the past." "It's okay, Janet. I understand. Sometimes people like Charlene are good at manipulating situations. The important thing is that the board is making it right now." I climbed back into the excavator and spent the next 40 minutes creating a clear path through the snow wall, wide enough for two-way traffic, safe and accessible. As I worked, I saw cars starting to form a line, waiting to leave. People waved at me as they passed. A few honked, supportive honks, not angry ones. By 1 p.m., the professional snow removal crew had arrived. 3 trucks, 2 loaders, proper equipment. They started carefully excavating the contaminated pile from my property, loading it into trucks for transport to the county site. Amanda Walsh from Channel 7 did a follow-up interview. "Mr. Garrison, we're hearing the HOA has agreed to your terms. How do you feel?" "I feel like justice was served, Miss Walsh. This was never about revenge. It was about standing up for what's right. Communities work when everyone respects everyone else's rights and property. The moment you start treating your neighbors like disposable resources, the moment you stop cooperating in good faith, that's when communities break down." "What's next for you?" "Next, I'm going to watch them clean up this mess. I'm going to spend the evening with my mother-in-law, making sure she's comfortable and safe. And come spring, I'm going to replant Sarah's roses. Life goes on, Miss Walsh. It always does." Epilogue. 3 months later. Spring renewal. It's late March now, almost April. The snow is finally gone, melted away over the past few weeks as temperatures climbed and spring arrived. I'm standing in what used to be a toxic waste dump and is now freshly turned remediated soil. The soil testing came back in late February. With the contaminated material removed and fresh topsoil brought in, the levels were back to normal, safe for planting. Mike Torres supervised the whole remediation process, wouldn't let me pay him beyond the initial survey, said it was for Sarah. Grace is inside, doing much better. Her cardiologist was pleased with her latest checkup. She's talking about maybe taking a trip this summer to visit her sister in Oregon. She seems lighter somehow, like standing up to Charlene had lifted a weight off both of us. The roses arrived today. I special ordered them from the same nursery Sarah used to love. American Beauties, Pink Promises, Golden Celebrations, all the varieties she had before. Also some new ones I think she would have liked. Tom Henderson stops by with coffee and donuts. He's the new HOA president, elected by acclamation after Charlene's removal. "How's it looking, Wade?" "Good, really good. Help me plant?" We spend the next 2 hours planting roses together, talking about the community, about how things are improving. The new easement agreement is fair and explicit. No dumping, no violations, clear terms. 3 other homeowners who'd had issues with Charlene's administration have reached out to me for advice on documenting their complaints. Charlene's fate? As for Charlene, the story is not pretty, but it's instructive. Once the local news aired the story, other issues started surfacing. Turns out the snow dumping wasn't her only creative interpretation of HOA authority. The State Real Estate Board opened an investigation into her business practices after discovering she'd used her position as HOA president to steer homeowners towards selling properties to her real estate agency. Clear conflict of interest, possible ethics violations. The county DA looked at the forged authorization document and the fake attorney phone call. They decided to pursue charges: fraud, forgery, unauthorized practice of law. As of last week, Charlene pleaded guilty to misdemeanor fraud in exchange for probation, community service, and surrender of her real estate license for 5 years. She and her husband quietly listed their manned mansion in February. It sold fast. Nice house despite the owner. They moved to somewhere in Arizona, I heard. Far away from snow, far away from HOAs she can't control, far away from consequences she finally had to face. The settlement money, $22,400 plus legal fees, was more than I needed just for repairs. Sarah's roses didn't cost that much, even with the remediation. Grace's medical bills were mostly covered by insurance. The driveway got fixed for less than estimated. So I did something Sarah would have loved. I worked with Tom and the new board to establish the Sarah Garrison Neighbor Assistance Fund. It's specifically for elderly and disabled residents who face unexpected expenses or HOA disputes they can't afford to fight. We've already helped 2 families. One elderly widow who couldn't afford a special assessment for driveway repairs, one disabled veteran who was getting violation notices for accessibility ramps Charlene had claimed were aesthetically unacceptable. Standing here in the spring sunshine, looking at these newly planted roses with their tiny leaves just starting to unfurl, I think about Sarah, about how she'd handled this whole situation, with grace, with strength, with an insistence on doing what's right even when it's hard. She always said roses are resilient. They look delicate, but they're tough. They can survive harsh winters if they've got good roots and proper care. They bloom again year after year, even after you think they might be gone forever. I think communities are like that too. They need good roots, mutual respect, honest cooperation, genuine care for your neighbors. They need proper care, standing up for bullies, insisting on fairness, not letting small injustices grow into big ones. And when someone tries to poison the soil, tries to dump their trash on your garden, tries to destroy what you've built, you don't just accept it. You don't just roll over and let them win. You stand your ground. You document everything. You use the tools available, legal, practical, and sometimes a 22,000-pound excavator to make your point. Justice served cold is always worth sharing, especially when it's served at 6 in the morning with a CAT 314 and 30 witnesses. Grace calls from the back door. "Wade? Tom, coffee's ready, and I made cinnamon rolls." "Coming, Mom." I take one last look at the garden, at the neat rows of newly planted roses, at the clean soil and the promise of blooms to come. Sarah would be proud of the garden, of standing up to Charlene, of the fund helping other people. But mostly, I think she'd be proud that I didn't let anger make me cruel. I made my point, I got justice, but I didn't become the villain in someone else's story. Sometimes that's the hardest part, winning without losing yourself in the process. The roses will bloom this summer. The community is healing. Grace is safe and happy. And somewhere in Arizona, I hope Charlene is learning that cooperation really does work both directions. If you're facing your own HOA nightmare, your own Charlene Westbook, remember this. Document everything. Know your rights. Find good allies, and don't be afraid to stand your ground. Sometimes the only way to teach bullies about community cooperation is to show them exactly what happens when cooperation ends. But do it right. Do it legally. Do it with witnesses and documentation and a surveyor who can confirm your property lines to the inch. And if you happen to have a commercial excavator operator's license and a point to make, well, timing is everything. Thanks for listening, folks. Wade Garrison, signing off. Remember, stand up for what's right. Protect the people you love, and never, ever let someone dump on your roses. Spring always comes, eventually, even after the hardest winter.